let's suppose you're interested in creating an RSI that has all 3 lines. If you right-click on the ThinkorSwim RSI, click Duplicate. First thing I recommend doing is naming the study. So we'll call this My RSI 50. We'll go in here and hashtag hint. Give it a description. And now we save it. Once you've created your indicator and you've saved it, named it, given it a hint, I'll show you why we gave it a hint. If we look at the RSI now that we just created, my RSI 50, by putting that hint in there, we now have a hint bubble that we can click on. If you start coding a lot of different indicators, you might start having more than you can keep track of. By putting in this hint, I wouldn't have to load it just to see what it is. I could just click on the hint and say, oh yeah, this is the RSI that I built with a 50 line that gives me trend identification and a signal line. So that's why we added the hint. We named it first before we did anything else, so that if we have to leave the study to go get some more code, it's already saved and it's already safe. Okay? So now we'll go back inside the code. We start looking down below all the other plots. We want to add a 50 line. To add a 50 line, we need to give it a plot. Now, personally, I like to give things a definition before I give it a plot. And you can see ThinkorSwim uses definition codes to define what it is it's going to plot, and then it plots after using that definition. So we will define trend signals. And we will plot trend using trend signals. And there we go. We have a regular RSI that has a 50 line. Let's get a little deeper in here. We could click on it, choose trend, change the color to what we want it to be, tell it how wide we want it to be, add dashes. But the next time we add the RSI 50, we'd have to do that again. See, it reset back to green, it reset back to flat, and it's only 1 wide. You could save default after we've already made the changes, or we could go in and we could code those changes. So we need an indicator that already has lines created in a dash. Okay. Those dashes are from painting strategy. So if we look over here in the reference section, constants, painting strategies, we find dashes. So, excuse me. We've identified the signal we want to give, where we want it to be. We've plotted that signal on the chart. Now, Let's add width. So now it will always be a 2 wide line, and then we can hide the bubble so that it won't plot a 50 bubble over here. We can hide the title so it never shows a title for the 50 in the study title area. And now we need to assign color. So we'll steal a line of code from down here. Choose color for it. And if I hit apply, I can see a little bit of that 50 line right there. So color 3 is gray. If I change it to 6, now it's green. 5 is red. You can go from 0 to 9 and choose your colors. Once you find a color that works for you, we'll go on to the next part of the code. 7 works good for me. It gives me a signal without being too intrusive. So I like number 7. 7 will work really good. You can see that that offers us a 50 line without being too intrusive. But now I want to change the RSI. Right? If we look at the RSI, we make sure that it is not defined as a color code down here, but it is right here. Define the normal color for RSI before it reaches overbought and oversold. Right now it's set at 7, which is what I used here. I don't want to confuse the two. So now I need to define what color I want to use for RSI. Four is yellow. That gives me an RSI that's yellow. That's not too bad. We could work with that. Let's try. We know that 5 and 6 are red and green, so we know that 7 is gray. Let's look at number 8. 8 is the same color as our 70-30, so that's not a very good color to choose. 9 works very good for us on this dark colored chart. 9 is white. We're gonna stick with white. Now we have the overbought and oversold for the RSI. We know that 5 is red and that 1 is cyan. We'll go ahead and make overbought and oversold red. So now we have an RSI that turns red when it is above or below the RSI 70 or the RSI 30. Okay. What else do we need to change in this code? So here's our new RSI. We've got bearish signals when it's below the 50, bullish signals when it's above the 50. we could also add a label. Now, we need to steal that code, that label of code from something inside of ThinkorSwim, because we don't know how to write our own label code. What indicator from ThinkorSwim already has a label in it? If we think about that for a minute, the MACD with prices has labels in it. So if we go down to MACD with prices, open up the code, you can see that it has a label inside here. So if we turn off the reference section, give us a little more signal. And here are 3 different labels. Now I'm going to grab 2 of these, and the reason I'm grabbing 2 is because one of these actually references color based off of what one of these values are up here, and another one of these labels just gives us a color based on numbers. Okay, so first let's take this label, which is based on a color from an earlier plot. And one of the things about labels that I've always found uncomfortable in ThinkorSwim, I'm using a dark chart, but if you're using a white chart, my label colors will not work very well for you, right? And so if I gave you an indicator and it used labels on a black chart and you're using a white chart, you would either not have very good signals, or you would need to know how to come in here and change the colors. But if we add a label that takes a reference based on the color of something that's already plotted on the chart, then a person can use this indicator and change the label colors without ever having to go in here and change the colors in the code. So we've added our label language, and now we need to make it work for our RSI. So the first part of the label says that we want to add a label, and we want it to turn on under this command. Well, we need a command. There's a few ways we can do this in ThinkorSwim. We can just say, yes, we want it on all the time. We can say, yes, we want it on as long as certain conditions are met. Or we can give the user an opportunity to turn it on or turn it off if they want to. And to do that, we add input show RSI label, yes. And now we take that command, add it to our label. What's in the parentheses here will be the words that are shown in our label. So we want it to just say RSI trend. We want to know where the RSI 50 is. So we can change all of this data. And we can say RSI trend plus bullish. Now, for this label to appear, we need to give it some instruction. If the RSI is greater than our trend, then the label will read RSI trend bullish. Else bearish. But let's add the first part of the code again. So now our label says if the user wants it to show, then the RSI label will appear. And if the RSI is above 50, it will say RSI trend bullish. If it's less than 50, it'll say RSI trend bearish. Now, instead of adding multiple commands for color, we can use the code that's already written up here to define the RSI colors, which is actually down here. So we're going to have to just take all of this, cut it out, and bring it down here below the RSI color, because we're going to reference the RSI's color in our label. So if we move a little bit of this code back up here, now we have a command, take value color. Well, we don't have anything in here named value, but we do have something named RSI, and so that's what we're going to use. So now, whatever color the RSI is, that will be the color of our label. Okay, so because the RSI changed multiple values, this isn't working out. So let's go ahead and give us something that we can reference that a user could still change in the dialog box. So let's define NA, which is double nan. And now let's plot let's call that label color. Let's give label color a color. And we'll make that, let's go with green. So now, in our label down here, we want to take the value color of label. So now, we have an RSI with a 50 line, and we have an RSI with a label telling us that it's bullish. If we click in the user's dialog box, we can see label color, and we can change this to whatever color we want. Now the reason I added a label is some people don't have enough room for a lot of indicators in their lower studies. So another thing you could do is you could move that up into the price area of the chart. Double click on it. So now I know that the RSI is in a bullish trend because I have a label, but I don't have to have the RSI on my chart. Okay. So we take that and put it back where it was. Turn the study back on. And we can choose to turn the label off. So here we have very clean, very efficient RSI with an RSI signal line. So now that we have the RSI with the RSI signal line, I like to make my signal line with a dash. First, let's go in, turn off the label, so we don't need that. Go into the code. Now dashed lines come from painting strategies. So we open up the reference, close the functions, open constants, find painting strategy dashes. So if we look down here, we defined trend, we plot the trend. Now we need to give it a paint strategy. Copy that, bring it up here, rename it. Now it's just a bunch of arrows. Wouldn't that be fun? We can double click on the painting strategy, double click on what we want it to be, and it changes it for us. Now we've got dashes. Click apply, hit OK. Now you can see, when we zoom in, it's a dashed line. Painting strategy offers a lot of different types of lines. All right, we can do histograms, horizontals, line with points, line with squares. We can just use points, we can just use squares. It's all up to the user, but instead of having to type any of these values, all we need to do is double click on what we want to change, and then double click on the change. Now you can see the RSI is dots for our signal line. Whatever fits your value, right? And so there you go. That is how you can add lines to code and add labels to codes in the ThinkorSwim.